So why don't I give you an overview of where we are in this series, and we're talking about a specific part of it now. So this is called 6 Constant Mitzvahs. It says pathways to God, 6 pathways to God. So what this series is, and we're in the 3rd class of the series, is from what Rabbi Weinberg calls the 6 constant mitzvahs. There are only 6 constant mitzvahs that we go through in our lives. All the commandments in the Torah we have to do, but what we have to do constantly is 6 different commandments. So the first commandment is to believe in the Almighty, belief. And that's what we spent the last 2 times on, belief in the Almighty. And the next one that we have to do at all times is a negative commandment, which is you shall not do. And that commandment is you shall not have other gods. So the second of the 6 constant commandments is you shouldn't have other gods. In the vernacular, it used to be called idol worship. You shouldn't make other gods for yourself. In the Torah, it says you shouldn't make other gods for yourself. So that's what we're going to cover today. And you'll find it's actually a quite unique way of looking at it, and it's quite relevant for us. The framework that we determined, and I want to just share it with you because it's important background, is what makes a constant mitzvah? There's only 6 of them. Rabbi Weinberg would always offer, not murdering is a constant commandment. You can't murder. You can't commit adultery. You can't make idols for yourself. So there's many, many things that we constantly can't do. But Rabbi Weinberg would say, and the Torah says, it's not one of the 6 constant commandments. So what does a constant commandment mean? Particularly when you have a negative commandment, thou shalt not do. What it means is that when you have the urge to do it, or any commandment, when you have the urge to do it and you overcome it, then you're fulfilling the commandment. So, for example, with murder, most of our lives we're not inspired to murder anyone. We're not enraged. We're not losing it. We're not going to murder. And so, therefore, it's not a constant commandment not to do. But rather, if someone gets you really upset, you're ready to kill the guy or the gal, and you say, no, I can't, because I can't do it. The Torah says no. Then you're fulfilling that mitzvah.
Right.
So the constant commandments, when it comes to a you shall not, is those things where there's a constant urge to do something, and you constantly have the opportunity not to do it. Constant commandment. Okay? So that's when we come back to this, the essence of what it means not to make other gods, we have to look at it through that filter. That's the first major point. I want to just give you the wrap-up of how the rabbis talk about steps to believing in the Almighty, which will frame what this class should be about. So last time, what we talked about in the mitzvah of belief in God, which is the first of the constant commandments, it means believe in God so well, know that God exists so thoroughly that you can act on it. And one of the ways to understand that is develop trust in the Almighty. You trust that the Almighty is there, and you can undertake with his blessing. So it's like a father who is below a kid on the handlebars, and the kid wants to get down, and he says, jump, and the kid feels confident that his father will be there and catch him. You're willing to undertake based upon a trust in the Almighty. And a great sage, Rabbi Chaya, in a famous work called Beauty of the Heart, said there's 7 steps to belief in God. I'm going to go through them quickly, but it'll give us the framework. The first step is you have to know God loves you, and he loves you more than your parents, and he loves you more than anything in the world. He loves you, and all he wants to do is give you good. The second step is even if he loves you, he might not know about you. No, our God knows everything about what you want to want, what you could want. He knows more about what you than you know yourself. He knows everything about you and your situation, so he's not detached. He also not only loves you, but knows everything about you, but he has all the power. He has all the power in the world. He can do anything he wants. The fourth step is that you have no power. And we'll now see what that means. You got to believe that the Almighty is all-powerful and can do anything in the world. For him giving you $1 billion, making a person not sick, saving the Jewish people, doing anything in the world is nothing. It's nothing. So the fourth step, as we said, is that you don't have any power. We don't have any intrinsic power. No power. Okay? He has all the power. We don't live as if we have the power. Fifth step is no strings attached to his giving. The sixth step is what he gave us already, all the amazing gifts he gave us already. Whatever we ask for is nothing compared to those gifts. And finally, he knows what's for our good. Those are the 7 steps that we went through last time. Again, I want to just focus on the first 4. Once you know Hashem loves you, you're in a different place with trusting the Almighty. When he loves you, when he wants to give to you, you really have a level of trust. But you have to understand he knows everything about you. He's not detached. And you have to further understand that everything is at his disposal. He has all the power. So what does it mean we don't have the power? We have to believe he has the power and we don't have the power. So I want to suggest to you that that is the second of the 6 constant mitzvahs. That really is the commandment of don't believe in any other gods. And we'll see how that's the case. Okay? Let's just begin. As I said, this commandment is the second of the 2. And in the vernacular, again, it's called idol worship. Don't make any idols. Don't have any other foreign gods. And getting back to the question that I posed, really the framework that I posed, if that's a constant commandment, this idea of not making other gods, how is that now relevant for us? We don't have an urge to make any other gods. It's not something that's relevant for us. So what I would propose is that we have to understand the essence of what that problem was when they did make other gods, and how is that expressed in our days? Because it's very much something that we have to deal with constantly. Okay?
Well, before you go, I think I think it's very evident as to why it's relevant to today. It has nothing to do with statues or little things that little icons that you pray to, but it's more of, the things in our lives that control us and that are, like material objects or worshiping, even, we've talked about this many times about the, worshiping the self and the control that we have over our lives and who's really driving the bus, so to speak, and thinking that we have this sort of outsized ability, thinking that, we are the ones that are actually doing it. Now, so I think that there's, and my wife always tells me, when it comes to various different things, whether it's a car or a television or whatever it might be, that these are just material objects and that, my oversized interest in them is a form of worship.
Idolatry.
Correct.
That's not what's really important.
Women are always on the mark.
Exactly.
Women
So,
are
but I do think the first thing you were about to talk about, I think is fascinating, and I haven't really thought about it. It's like, well, so what's the problem with that? And what was the original problem with that?
Let's talk quickly, because we're going to move to your points very quickly, because I'd rather get to what's current and relevant. But I do think it makes some sense to understand where did they go off and what's the root of that.
Right.
I think where they went is that the first generation after Adam, who had a conception of God that we can't even imagine. He knew exactly what God was. But nevertheless, his generations, starting with the generation of Enosh, went off and they started to worship, not idols, but they worshiped the sun, the moon, they worshiped powers. What did they say? They said that the Almighty works through these powers. And so honoring them is like honoring the Almighty. If you honor a minister who works for a king, you're giving honor to a king. Now, that sounds right. So what was the problem with that? The problem with that is that, frankly, while the Almighty works, sometimes he works through forces, he directly is involved with our lives. So the analogy that Rabbi Weinberg would say is when a king brings you a tray of food, you start to appreciate the tray. That's an embarrassment to the king who's giving you the food. He's giving you directly the food,
Right.
not the tray. And that beginning problem, which doesn't sound to be such a big problem, right? That ultimately morphs over time to the Jews living as if God didn't exist. So let's talk about what that looks like. Because that's now more grounded, and that comes from the Torah. In the Torah, in the last book of Devarim, in a portion called Akev, it talks about a number of things. This is Nitzavim. I'm almost there. 1 second. I marked the place, but I obviously did it wrong, right? I always do things wrong. Really. Just bear with me because it's important for us to get the context. Oh, here it is. Okay, fine. Okay, so the Torah says in this parsha, it says, take care lest you forget the Almighty, your God, and not observing his commandments, his ordinances, his statutes, which I command you today. Why will that happen? Lest you eat and be satisfied, and you build good houses, and you settle, and your cattle and flocks increase, and you increase silver and gold for yourselves, and everything you have will increase, and your heart will become haughty, and you will forget the Almighty, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves, etc., etc. And what does it then go on to say after it tells you that you shouldn't have done that? Because, and you may say in your heart, it's my strength and the might of my hand that made all this wealth.
Right.
Called in Hebrew, Kochi va'otzim yadi. It's my strength and my hand that made all this wealth. Okay? So classically what we're saying, to get bridged back to where you were and where we are as individuals, is we rely on a lot of things that have nothing to do with the Almighty. Yes, we believe in the Almighty, but do we live a life as if the Almighty is in control? Or we live a life that we're in control? And where does it meet? Because it's a sensitive issue. See, we as Jews have to both undertake, we have to do things in this world. We're not meant to just sit back. But on the other hand, we have to believe that the Almighty blesses our efforts and makes things happen. So we can't rely on all the different things that we have. Is it our bank account we're relying on? That if we get, God forbid, sick, we can hire a good doctor? Is it our intelligence we're relying on to get us that good job? Is it our schooling we're relying on? Is our stature we're relying on? Are we relying on the fact we live in America in a safe democratic country? Is that what we're relying on? Are we relying on the police force? What are we relying on? There's a lot of relying on our wealth. There's so many things we rely on. And the notion here is that, one second. Don't make any mistake about it. You can have all the money in the world. You can have all kinds of access, all kinds of things. But God forbid you get sick, you have nothing. And you can have so many things in life, or very little in life, and the Almighty can bless your efforts. You can have everything you want. It's really very little to do with our efforts here. The strength of our hand and the strength of who we are is not what gets us where we need to go. Now, it's a balance. And it's something that we have to talk about. We'll talk about more. But that, broadly put, is what it means to not rely on other gods. Okay? Not rely on other gods. Now, we're going to go even deeper, but generally I think we can relate to that. We'll get back to how to balance the two, because certainly, theory makes sense, and in the detail, it's very hard to apply this. I wouldn't say very hard to apply. It's just different for different people, and you'll see what I mean. Okay? I want to go now to another point. It's a deeper point, because it even goes beyond that. This is what we call appreciate, but the Torah is going to push all of us, you and I, to confront a different reality. And that is, in the following portion of the Torah, the Tzavim it's called, in Devarim, when it talks about an oath that the Jewish people need to take. And it's the oath that says, if you do the right thing, you'll get good. If you do the wrong thing, you won't. Life is in front of you. Choose good. Choose life. That's what happens in Parshas Nitzavim. And it says something quite interesting. It says in that parsha, that portion, I call the heavens and the earth today to bear witness against you. I have placed life and death before you, blessing and curse. Choose life that you may live. Classic line in Judaism, choose life so you may live. Fine. The rabbis ask, what does it mean, I call the heaven and the earth today to bear witness against you? What does that mean? So Rashi, the famous commentator, says, you know what it means? He said, just like the sun and the moon, they get up when they're supposed to get up, they go back when they're supposed to get back. Every day, they reliably do what they're supposed to do in accordance with their essence, and they don't have reward and punishment. And you guys, the man who does have reward and punishment, all the more so, you should do in accordance with what you're created for, right? Now, how is that understandable? The real issue is they don't have free will. They can't change what they're going to do. But you and I have free will. So what kind of lesson am I supposed to learn from that? Almighty, they can't do anything different, but we can. So what are we supposed to learn from this? Get the question? Very, very strong question. They have no free will. What's the comparison? So the Rabbi Weinberg said the following. We think we have a lot of free will. We think we can do everything. We think that raising our hand is up to us. But the Rosh Yeshiva would always say to us, you can't explain that you raised your hand, how you did it, what you did. You can't explain how you thought through this particular problem, this particular issue. You can't explain anything. When you want to do something, when you have sheer will, raw will, the Almighty does it for you. What this understanding means is that, you know what? We have to re-examine all the things that go on in our lives. What this classic understanding about our God is that He does everything for us. We just have will, raw will. And to that extent, that's like the analogy. All we have the will to do that's different than the sun and the moon is to want to do it. So we're just like them, except our essence is we have free will, and the Torah is telling us that's what we're meant to do. And by the way, by exercising that free will, we won't get it done. The Almighty blesses the effort and gets it done for us, but we get the reward and punishment for it. We get the reward. So that's how the Rabbi Weinberg understands that. But what that means for us is that it opens up a whole world in terms of our thinking. Who gets things done? How much can I accomplish? How much can I accomplish? In other words, if the Almighty does everything for you, there's not much you can't accomplish. It's a question of how much you want to undertake. So again, we're now going to talk about this deeper concept. First of all,
so I have a question. So
yes.
Just tying it in with just the fact that, there's a lecture being offered, and okay, so you're saying that it's really not free, because you said that we only have will. So the fact is that we signed on to this lecture. If you're getting a reward or punishment, the reward is the learning. The punishment is we have less wisdom.
No, I think you have. I don't have any punishment.
No,
pleasure.
Well,
I'm pure pleasure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I followed that, but what's the?
So in this case, like this, you don't get.
Well, you say that we don't have we have to take the free out. We've been given will.
Right.
Will is choice.
Yeah. No. Look, I'll put it in this language. Your point, Michelle. You decided, you had will and decided you wanted to get on the Zoom. The fact that you could walk outside, the fact that you could do the Zoom, the fact we think they're electrons that did it on their own. The Almighty allowed you to have all of that. But you had the will. You pressed the button, so to speak. You activated in your will because you decided you wanted to hear Torah. And that was your free will choice. The Almighty just did everything. He just made it happen.
So everything is available to us. It's a matter of activating it or not activating
right. So that's your job to activate it. Now,
Right.
in terms of reward and punishment, you're going to get amazing amounts of reward for what you just did. That's just positive feedback from me because I appreciate it. He gave me something to do. I love teaching, and I'm so happy that you're here and to see you. That for sure you're getting. But you're also getting tremendous reward in your bank accounts for this action. You don't do things that are wrong, but if someone does something that's wrong, that's their free will choice. It's activated for them, and they could potentially get punished. There's reward and punishment for everything we do. It's a meritocracy in this world, the Almighty's world. But that's how reward and punishment relates to your free will. The only point was we think we do a lot. We think we're really in control. We think all this a priori goes without any other instincts by the Almighty, without any other involvement, because it's disconnected from the source. We don't really understand that nothing gets done without the Almighty's involvement. There's two analogies I like to use to understand that. And it's like this. Difference between let's say a robot that's run by a battery and a robot that's run by electricity in a plug in the wall, right? The Almighty runs us like a plug in the wall. He constantly has to be plugged in. He's constantly plugging in, actively plugging in to make us go. He didn't make us put a battery in, put it over here to the left, and is not involved with us every single second. That's the model of God in Judaism. Another way to understand it, I'm just going to say it. It's a high concept, but I think it's important to say. Our notion of the Almighty, first of all, there's either one of two ways in this world. This world was either created or a big accident. We were either created or a big accident. There's nothing in between. Now, clearly, Judaism says there's a creator. There's a creation model. That's our Almighty. Our God is totally, it's creation. It's not haphazard. It's not random. So, based upon that, when you have a creator who creates something that's finite, if you create a painting, right? You create something. The creator has to be on a different dimension than what's created. You're a person. You're a three-dimensional person. What you create is not three-dimensional. It's two-dimensional. Whatever you create in this world, it's not going to be a person. It's not going to be a person. It's got to be that a being that's infinite created the finite world. It's got to be that something not finite created it, not something bounded. Because then you keep asking, well, who created that? Who created that? Okay? All I'm suggesting is the classic definition of God in Judaism, he's infinite. He's infinite. Has no limitations, no boundaries, is perfect. You guys heard that before? God in Judaism is infinite. So how do you wrap your head around the fact that infinite, how does infinite stand next to finite? What I mean by that is infinite's everythingness. Everything. Infinite's everything. How do you have finite next to infinite? So what the rabbis say is that God, in a miracle of creation, he has to will us every single second this finite existence to be here. There's no other way. Like if you accept creation, and you accept the fact that our God's infinite. That's the classic Jewish model. It's like God has to constantly keep it together. He has to constantly create us and recreate us to keep us together as a finite creation, living our lives and doing all the things we're doing. Metaphysically, it's kind of a big concept that the Almighty has to constantly create us and recreate us and be involved with us every single second. Every single second. But if you understand that that's our context, we can really kind of imagine that all the things that are going on inside, behind the curtain, God's doing all the steps. We have an analogy, right? We have x-rays. We know there's a revealed reality and an internal reality. And that's kind of fun. You look at your hand. I don't know about you, but it's kind of cool looking at an x-ray. Like what's going on inside. Imagine if you could look at it moving around and things moving. It's kind of interesting. There's an internal reality and there's an external reality. Same thing with us. We look like we're driving the bus. We're doing all the things. The Almighty is constantly powering us. The Almighty is constantly involved with us. So that's our understanding in Judaism. So Now let's understand that then. And go back to what I was saying before. That means that everything is up to him. If he blesses our efforts, we can get it done. If he doesn't bless our efforts, we can't get it done. It's an interesting concept, right? That's the concept. If we rely on ourselves, so that's the concept. So let's trace our steps now, because that's the most important thing in my opinion. We said that relying on other powers, relying on other things but the Almighty is idol worship. But how is it every single second they were involved in this, we're over that issue? How does that work? And that's because of what we just said. If we know that the Almighty can do everything, there's nothing I can't do. The word I can't. There's nothing I can't do. There's nothing I can't undertake. I have to have my headset on straight. I have to have the will to do something, and then it'll get done. If I think I do everything, if I live a life like I'm in control and I'm doing it, and I don't know about you, but when I was in yeshiva and trying to change this part about myself and that part about myself, I said, okay, I'll get 10% better, I'll get 20% better, 30% better, maybe tops. But I know myself. I failed at this for how many years, and I can't do that. There's a lot of I can'ts because I do everything. What I do, I know I can do. What I accomplish, I know I can accomplish. Perhaps I can do a little bit more, but I can't do that. I can't be nice to everybody. I can't love every Jew. I can't learn all of Torah and remember it. I can't save the Jewish people, work for the Jewish people. I can't. There's a lot of I can'ts that come out when I take credit for my accomplishments. Because I know I've only done this, and I can only do a bit more. But if I realize that I want to do something, and the Almighty blesses my effort, then I can achieve so much. So the constant temptation, the constant urge that we all have is the voice of I can't. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't do the other thing. And Rabbi Weinberg would always say, not what you can't do. You can. Because the Almighty does everything. The Almighty, if He's blessing your efforts, there's nothing you can't achieve. There's nothing you can't achieve. There's no I can'ts. The question is, how much effort do you want to put in? Is this important? Is this not important? But it's not that I can't achieve it. So you can realize that we can undertake and accomplish so much more with that perspective. It's so empowering. I can't become perhaps much smaller. Now people say, look, if you have a certain, can I be an Olympic athlete? I don't think I could be Michael Jordan, right? I'm a 5'7" Jew. I'm not going to be Michael Jordan. Okay, so I can't do that. But we're not talking about things with the physical limit. Within your sphere of accomplishment, I think we all recognize there's so much more we probably can do. And this concept of the Almighty blesses your efforts so you can set your sights high is tremendously empowering. Tremendously empowering. That's the essence of the constant mitzvah. The constant urge is I can't. The ability to overcome that with understanding that the Almighty blesses your efforts. Everything comes from Him. And by the way, look, I, as you, did not grow up with this understanding. And by the way, I don't think even people who grow up doing Torah and mitzvahs grow up really living with this understanding. Because the reality is, and I'm coming back now to be grounded, it's challenging because this conception is challenging because the Almighty put us in the world with powers and with opportunities. And He said, go and do things. In business, I don't sit back and let the deal happen. I have to close the deal. I have to think through the exercise. I have to undertake learning. We have to use our mind. We come up with solutions to problems. We teach our children. We teach different situations. I'm teaching now, right? It's me, right? It's me, isn't it? It's me. So there's a lot of opportunity to say it's me, it's me, it's me. And they're valid. However, we have to rethink some things. So when I was first looking at this issue for myself in yeshiva, I could look at my travels with my brother in New Zealand and how I got to Israel, and how I found the Discovery Seminar, and how I went back to work, and how he got religious, and how this whole thing emanated. And I could say there's a whole bunch of coincidences that occurred. And I made this choice, and I made that choice, and I made this choice, and I made that choice. And that is true. On the surface, I did all those things. But when I think seriously about what happened, I had a desire for more, nothing more formed than that, nothing more formed than that. I went around the world, I had a few bucks in my pocket. The Almighty directed me to Israel. The Almighty directed me to Asia Torah and Discovery. The Almighty gave me the strength to open my eyes, not close them, which most people do. Most people don't really let it in. He gave me the strength over a period of a year and a half to decide to quit my job, to have the courage to come. When I got there, to stay. There's a whole series of things that I'm convinced had very little to do with me. Now, I only credit myself that I showed up. I wanted to be there. I did the right thing. I had a certain degree of stick-to-itiveness. But that's it. And the Almighty blessed my efforts. That's what happened. So, I think in our lives, we can maybe peel the onion back a little sometimes and think, is that really how it went? Was it just my involvement? Or was it something beyond that? In my life, certainly, I've seen that. I remember when I went out fundraising, and I spent a year trying to get a person on the phone. And when I got him on the phone, I thought nothing of it. I got him on the phone. Then I realized, like a bit later, what do you mean? The difference between you getting him and not on the phone, that didn't have the involvement of the Almighty. The fact that he was nice to you versus not nice to you, he remembered you, it's just so random. It's just so coincidental. And so many of the things that I now consider to be my efforts, my involvement, my thoughts, perhaps are not. Not just perhaps are not. And they really have a great deal of interplay with the Almighty. Okay? So that's the construct. The Almighty, if we understand He gets everything done, all we want to do is undertake and focus our efforts. Then there's so much more we can achieve. There's really very few I can'ts in life. If I take credit for my accomplishments, then I did that. And I know I did this and I can't do this. I can do this, but I can't do this. I can do this or 30% more, but I can't do this. When we realize that the Almighty does everything, it's tremendously empowering. So getting back to our model of belief in the Almighty, you have to first know you love the Almighty. That the Almighty loves you more than anything in the world, that He knows everything about you, that He has all the power, and that you don't have the power. Meaning to say, like we're saying now, you don't live with the reality that you're in control. You live with the reality that the Almighty is doing everything. That you're just setting your direction. And that life is very empowering. Because if we just set our direction and set our sails, it's like having a huge gust of wind in the back of our sails. We know we're going to scream down that channel. So too, when we know that the Almighty has all the power, and we rely on Him, we undertake in our world doing our things. So by the same token, we rely that He'll bless our efforts. We can undertake more, and certainly we can achieve so much. Okay? So that's the basic construct. Before I go forward, any other questions? And I want to get to some practical tools to help us live with this. So we're good? Okay. So
maybe you could have the person who just joined in mute herself.
Yeah.
If someone did join in, please
And
mute yourself. I don't see someone pop
Yeah,
up.
there's some background noise.
It's it's a Henshi dress there.
Okay, so I don't see it.
You can mute everyone.
I can?
Yes.
Maybe.
There you go.
Yeah.
You just did it.
No, she did it.
Oh, maybe she
No.
Yeah,
You guys
okay.
are unmuted. Right. Okay, good.
done.
Okay, terrific. So now where we are is the following. We said that if we live with the Almighty, that He accomplishes, when we just have will, we focus our attention, we choose what we want to do, we can accomplish some more. And there's really very little I can'ts in life. a very empowering concept. So how do we live with that reality? Because as I said, we're out there doing so much, particularly and I'll share with you another piece of Torah quickly, but particularly in the space of ideas. It's very hard to dissociate me with my ideas. I said that. What do you mean? Like, so how do I do that? And the Talmud says, by the way, it's a discussion in the Talmud that says if someone tells you they worked to attain Torah and found Torah, believe them. The rabbis ask, what do you mean work for something and found it? When you find something, it's like you randomly find it. Finding something like you didn't do any work to find it, you just found it. You came upon something in the street, you found it. And the rabbis say, we work for things, Torah, the Almighty blesses our efforts and gives it to us. That's the understanding. So to rewire ourselves is really the key. And how do we rewire ourselves? I want to give you a couple of tips that Rosh Shiva had given us. And some I've thought about on my own. So the first thing the Rabbi Weinberg would say is, try not to take credit for your accomplishments. Try not to take credit for those things you accomplished. Right? We all know the Almighty led you to that. Don't take credit for your accomplishments. What's a corollary of that, which is quite powerful, don't take pride in your accomplishments. Don't take pride in your accomplishments. So here's the kicker. Don't take pride, but take a lot of pleasure. A subtle difference, but it's all important. Take pleasure in the fact that you accomplished something. You stuck it out, but the Almighty blessed your efforts. Take a great deal of pleasure. But to think that I'm something special because of all that I accomplished, come on.
But is
couldn't get out of bed without the Almighty.
But is it
Again,
okay?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just encapsulate. Don't take pride in our accomplishments, but take a great amount of pleasure. Yeah, Mark.
But is it okay to say, like, if you had a success, for example, in business, I advise a client and it worked out, my advice was very well. If I say, God gave me the skills to be able to, do what I do at this level. I'm not saying that I, completely came up with it, but I was given, talent. I was given, intelligence and ability, and I take pleasure in that. Maybe pride. I don't know. There's maybe a fine line between pride and pleasure, but is it okay to think I had the success and, I did this, but it's because God gave me the ability to do that.
Right. So it's a very fine line, as you say, but I will tell you that I am proud of a lot of my accomplishments, and that's a problem. I'll tell you why. I'll build up why I think that, because I showed up. I just showed up. Like if you just showed up, let's say you just showed up that appointment, and that's really what happened. You showed up. You wanted to do the right thing. You wanted to take care of your family. The Almighty blessed all your efforts. You showed up. Now, take pleasure in the fact you're doing the right thing. You're taking care of your family. You work hard. You have a good ethic. People like you. Take pleasure in all of the wonderful things that you're given. But I am not better for that. And my feedback loop when I do these things is, come on, Like I'm just being candid. I like solving problems in business. I am very good at solving problems in banking, and I like it, and I know that. Okay, now I shouldn't be proud of it, but we often have a feedback loop to who we are. It's who we are. I'm that clever banker. I'm that great husband. I'm that whatever you are. You know what you are? You're a person who gets up every day and wants to do the right thing. He wants to make a contribution. He wants to love his wife and family. He wants to give back to the Almighty. He wants to make the world a better place. And you take great pleasure in doing, I'm not talking to you, by the way, I'm talking to me. When I'm telling you this, I'm talking to me. Because that's what we should be saying to ourselves. Moses was the most accomplished of all of us. He's the most accomplished Jew there ever will be. But it said that Moses was the most humble of all Jews. How could that work? How do you have the most humble Jew being the most accomplished Jew that there ever will be? And the answer is humility in Judaism is defined by saying a humble person knows every one of his strengths, but he knows they all come from the Almighty. All of his strength and efforts and success come from the Almighty. Therefore, he can undertake and accomplish anything. Of course, take great pleasure in the fact you have to get up and, as Michelle said, exercise that will to do the right things in life. There's a lot of buckets of investments we can make in time and effort in this world. Some of which are good, some of which are not, some of which are meaningless, right? You're going to be rewarded for all the right choices you made to be involved in the right things. The Almighty made it happen. The you in it is the chooser, the person who chose to do it. It's not, you are not the consultant who solved the problem. You are the great guy who walked up to serve the Almighty every day and serve your family. So that's a distinction I'm raising. So I'm raising it in this way because I happen to think that when I work on not taking pride in my accomplishments, but taking pleasure in them, it makes all the difference. It's subtle, but it makes all the difference. I want to give you now 2 tools that help that. Okay? When you accomplish something, when you solve that problem, Mark, for that client, you come up with that great structure in your business. And someone says to you, Mark, great job. You did so well with it for these reasons. You say to yourself or out loud, thank God, thank God. You say over thank God. Why? Because you're ascribing by saying that, not saying thanks, but thank God, because you're ascribing that accomplishment to the Almighty. You say thank God, and you simultaneously ascribe it to the right place and take great pleasure that it came about. Thank God. Thank God. I'm happy the Almighty blessed my efforts, and I'm directing where it came from. It came from the Almighty. So every time you get accolades, every time you feel good about something, you walk out of that meeting and you know you solved the problem. You walk out of that meeting and you know you sold the client. You walked out of that meeting and got the credit approved in credit committee. You walk out and say, thank God. Thank God I got it involved. Thank you, Hashem, for making it happen. First tool. And see that tool reworks us. It rewires us to see the accomplishment in its right context. The Almighty made that happen for me. And thank you, Almighty. I take a great amount of pleasure in that. First idea. Second idea is when we start to develop our own perspective on how to think through day to day our relationship with the Almighty. A lot has to do with prayer. Let's use the motif of prayer. It doesn't matter whether it's formal in shul or in your home. It has no relevance. When I talk to God each day and I start asking for help in things that I need, that I want, right? Ask for help in those things that you need or you want and start believing that the Almighty delivers them to you. So in other words, if I have, I'll give you the perfect, if I have a business deal and I want to have success, Almighty, please give me the right words to say. Almighty, please do this. Almighty, can you help me with this? You start living the reality that the Almighty's in charge. If you have all the right stuff in place, but you can't get out of bed because you're sick, you have a fever, God forbid worse, you're totally not in control. You're totally not in control. So let's be real with it. Let's realize that the Almighty's blessing our efforts all the time. The Almighty is going to come out of my mouth what comes out proper and not what doesn't. I remember, and it's so true, and this is what I do sometimes. Sometimes when I made some errors in calculation in my business life, and in retrospect, I said, why didn't I think of that? That was so obvious. That point was so obvious. And if I thought of it, I would have easily had the solution. Why was it blocked then? And it wasn't a tough point. I thought about it an hour later. And the other way around. Why did those points come readily to my mind to make the right choices at the right time? It's curious. I think to myself all the time, the Almighty loves me, and he wants to show me signs that I'm not in control. Not too much, because he wants me to succeed. Not too much. But he shows me constantly signs that make me understand I'm not in control. Last point of that, just as an example, many times in my business, I'll work really hard to get a deal. And it craters. And it should not have cratered. It's the one that should get done. And within the same 3 weeks of those couple of deals that I have lost, I lost them, I got other deals that were so improbable, and they closed within 3 weeks. And it happened to me 3 or 4 times in my career, where it was just like, this one should certainly have closed. And this one wasn't even in the realm. And yet time after time, the Almighty helps me see that I'm not really in full control. So the 2 tools I want to, again, help us with is say, thank God, Baruch Hashem, whatever you say, as you go through your day. You have a success, thank God. Thank you, Almighty. Someone gives you a compliment, you did great here, thank God. Thank God. Ascribing to the Almighty what really is happening and taking pleasure, not pride, number 1. Number 2, start asking for things. I was on my bike yesterday. I'm going to close with this. I was on my bike yesterday, and I was feeling a bit flat. So what would I normally do? I'm riding the bike. So I'm pushing through. It's me pushing through. And I said to myself, I was trying to do this. I said, Almighty, help me. Almighty, help me get through this. Almighty, keep me going. And that's it, because that's what it's about. The Almighty can do anything. So when I start to get into the habit of invoking the Almighty, invoking this in my relationship, speaking it out, talking the talk will help me walk the walk. I'm suggesting those are the 2 best tools to do it. And with those tools, we'll start to rely more on the Almighty. And you'll see that it'll help you undertake more. It'll help you undertake more confidently. It will help you reach a bit more at a different horizon. And it's a process. So, and the last and conclusion of this process is, we do want to not live with I can'ts, because there's a lot more we can achieve, right? So let's not get extreme about it, but let's start realizing there's a lot that we can get accomplished. And there's not many I can'ts. And set ourselves for our priorities, to try to fulfill our priorities. And day to day, live a life of taking pleasure in the Almighty, helping us get things done. We have a healthy understanding of who we are. We feel great about who we are. We get up every day to make a difference in the world, make a difference in our families, and that's what we accomplish in life. We choose good things. And then lastly, invoke the help of the Almighty. Day to day, you start building a beautiful fabric to the relationship. So that's what I have. I'm done. I'll stay on the line if you have questions. If not, we can wrap up.
Amen.
Amen. Thank God we have you to teach us.
Yes. Thank Baruch Hashem. My wife said we have to make the choice to go on to this lecture this afternoon.
Great. Okay, good. Nice to see you.
Yes.
Same here. Thank you.
I'm going to exit now, okay?
Okay,
Yes,
have a great day.
thank you so much.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank